Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting for December 5th, 2002. With that, call the meeting to order and we'll do a roll call.
Before I proceed with the roll call and for the record, Commissioner Jasmadarian will not be attending today's meeting. Commissioner Fay?
Here.
Commissioner Lowry?
Here.
President Peterson?
Here. Move on to the next item on the agenda. The consent items, the following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of the commission or the audience requesting a separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed. There's only one item on the consent agenda, and that is approval of the October 3, 2022 minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, with that, any discussion? None? I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. On to the third item, the GWP Commission and staff comments. I guess we could start with our staff.
Good afternoon. What do we have? December 13th, City Council meeting. We're going to discuss the number of Wärtsilä engines for the Grayson Repower. And January 10th, we'll be discussing the Shoal Canyon project. So those are two big items. So in the next 5 weeks, it would be very difficult to put the Christmas or holiday season in between. And we're looking forward to getting resolution on these really old extended projects.
We'll start over to my left. Commissioner Lowry?
I have nothing.
Okay. Commissioner Fay? Nothing. I would only add a wish of happy holidays for everyone, and wish that as we go into the holiday season that everyone stays healthy and is able to have some time with friends and family and an ability to recharge. It's been, just as the last several years have been, a dramatic and interesting year. So maybe we'll have the inverse of the Chinese wish, and that we won't live in quite such interesting times in the next coming year. So with that, we'll go on to item number 4, reports and information.
Yes, sir. Today we have legislative update by Leo Zalian, Utility Legislative Affairs.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Leo Zalian here. Happy to provide you with a brief legislative update. To start with, we'll start with the legislative calendar for the 2022 and 23. So we just had the general election in November, as you know. Today actually is the day the legislature reconvenes. So first day, we have a new legislature that went up, took their oath and started their new cycle. And January 1st is the statutes take effect. So the new legislative session starts. We're expecting a number of legislative bills coming up this cycle. We'll preview some of that in the coming slides. Just wanted to highlight a few key bills that we were tracking. SB 1020, this was the Clean Energy and Job and Affordability Act of 2022. This has established interim targets to meet the SB 100 goals of 100% clean energy by 2045. This was signed into law. And next we have SB 1158 by Becker. This established a hourly reporting methods for GHG, so greenhouse gas emissions. This was also signed into law. This is something that we're looking into because it's something new that the state will be requiring all the utilities to do. We're working with the State Energy Commission to come up with guidelines and to proceed of what we need to provide in order to comply with this law. Next, we have AB 847. This is the electric mylar balloons. This is a ban on it by 2027. There's a way that they have some new standards of creating a new way of having conductive, non-conductive electric balloons that have been produced by SD&G. But by 2027, this is going to be phased out. As you know, Glendale has already adopted a ban on Mylar balloons. So we took a progressive step on that already. This was signed into law as well. And then we have SB 847. This is the Diablo Canyon Power Plant. This was extended for additional 5 years to meet the energy goals or the high demand of energy for state of California. This was adopted until 2030. And then we have some key water bills that we want to highlight as well. We have SB 1157. This is to establish new standards for indoor residential water use from January 2025. We start at 47 GPCD, which is this is the gallons per capita per day, and starting by January 1st, 2030, 42 gallons per capita a day. Basically, they're reducing to ensure that residents are conserving water, and as you know, water is limited in California. We want to ensure everyone is aware of it, and we're going to do kind of educational efforts to ensure that our residents are conserving water. Next, we have SB 230. This is the constituent of emerging concerns. This is where the State Water Board is having some programs to ensure that they do a number of testing in the water to look at any kind of emerging concerns that the water might have. This is also signed into law. And then next we have AB 2147. This is the income tax inclusion. This is to exclude personal income tax or corporate tax allowed for 2022 to 2027. So when residents get turf rebates, that is not considered as income source. So this was also signed into law. And then next we have, from our last commission meeting, there was a request by a commissioner that wanted to know a little more about the Inflation Reduction Act. As you may know, this was submitted by Congress, approved by the president. There are a number of bills right now, but there's a lot of money included in this, over billions of dollars, but mainly what it is tax credits. And this is just a list of kind of what's available now. What we're doing as a Water and Power, we're working with our CMUA partners, with SCAPA, understanding kind of what the requirements are, what the guidelines are to ensure that Glendale also participates in those grant opportunities. We're working with our partners, the Ferguson Group, who's a grant writer in DC, working with our partner in SCAPA to look at any possible opportunities that we can to ensure some grants, some money is coming to Glendale as well. We'll have more on that information as the year proceeds, because right now the Treasury Department is kind of understanding what the needs are, and within the next few months we'll have more information on this. We'll be happy to provide that at a later date. With that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. On the water bills, 1157, for indoor water use, do we have a way to reliably track indoor water use as compared to total water use for our customers? How does that apply to a utility like ours?
Thank you for that question. Unfortunately, we don't have a way, because we only have one meter that tracks the actual whole water use of that individual meter. So we don't have a way, but this is just, this bill was introduced to ensure that kind of a more education opportunity for residents and utilities to kind of have with residents to ensure that they're conserving more water. But it's a number that we kind of need to track in order to kind of educate our residents. We do have AMI system that tracks that, but we don't have anything that differentiates between the indoor versus outdoor.
Does anybody?
I don't think we do. None of them do. And then we have Mike DeGhetto if wants to add more to it.
Yeah, I'd love your thoughts, just because there's obviously using water indoors is for kind of really important life and safety stuff like drinking and cooking and bathing, and outdoors is mostly for landscaping, which is less critical. But how do we deal with this if we can't tell the difference?
President Peterson, members of the commission, Michael DeGhetto, Chief AGM for Water, and Commissioner Fay, that number ties into legislation called Making Water Conservation a California Way of Life. And every year, we need to calculate what our efficient use of water is in aggregate for the utility. And so that is a number that you multiply times the number of people that live in the city to come up with one of the amounts of water that's part of your demands. So it's not really something that there's an expectation that individual people are only using that much water, if that makes sense. It's just a number to ratchet down the total amount of water that the utility is supposed to serve to meet what would be considered, reasonable demands. So it's really a way of getting people to use less water outside, to be quite honest, especially for utilities that haven't done as much work as Glendale has with turf removal, with putting in drip irrigation and kind of even being efficient even with turf. So I know it says what it says, but it's really something for a calculation.
So it's more of a holistic for the department or the city as a whole, rather than an
Right.
individual customer.
Right, so we would take 198,500 residents, whatever the Division of Finance in that month or that period says we have as a population, and multiply it by those numbers, starting in those years that were shown, to add to the total amount of water that is supposed to be considered efficient use within the city. And I know it's a little bit confusing, but that's really what it is. Because when that legislation was first passed, it was, I want to say it was 55 gallons per capita per day. So this is kind of like a ratcheting down of that amount.
And is there any kind of compliance or enforcement mechanism if our number is significantly higher or we're late in achieving those targets?
The compliance doesn't start, I don't think it's until about 2027. We start reporting, and this year was kind of the first year we had to report. It's going to take a few more years of reporting. Then there'll be a time period where the water board compares what you calculate as your efficient use towards what the actual use was, to maybe start off with, like, the first thing would be notification. Like, you need to do more to get people to conserve. And then there might be a couple of years of that, and then there could be fines and administrative orders much later. But I would say that for Glendale, we're much further ahead than most utilities in the state. I mean, there's still areas in Sacramento that don't have water meters for their customers' homes. So a person can literally just let the water run all day, and they just pay a flat rate. So this legislation is trying to capture kind of every state that all the water utilities are in.
Thank you. And I had a question about turf removal as well. So that the tax exclusion's great, and I'm wondering if there's any consideration about the rates that we're offering for turf removal. I think Metropolitan Water District sets a baseline, and then some agencies go above and beyond that.
Oh, that's a great question for Mike.
President Peterson, members of the commission, Commissioner Fay, I actually spoke to the council about that. I had kind of an extensive presentation, and really, it's this issue, in my mind, related to we're collecting revenue from customers based on the cost of service. So taking revenue and giving it to a certain class of customers to fix up their yard doesn't seem like something that's very beneficial as a whole, especially considering, in my mind, the rate making, as well as it's even harder to make a tie to that, because some people might say, like in City of Los Angeles, they say that paying people to take out their lawns saves water supply. Well, City of LA has its own water supply. And I think I've mentioned this before, but Glendale doesn't. So if we were going to take customers' money to have people conserve, we'd actually have less water to serve. So it's hard to like kind of tie a nexus to that. Now, having said that, MWD has upped their turf rebate to $3 per square foot. So it had been $2 for a long time, and they've upped it to $3. And I would encourage anyone to go to our website that wants to get rid of their turf, because if you get that $3 rebate, you remove your turf, then you're going to continue to save money because your water bill is going to be lower. So, you know, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like those subsidies for solar panels, right? It would be taking revenue from apartment dwellers and giving it to people that have houses to fix up their house. And that's just not something that we are doing with our rates now.
Thank you.
All right.
Any further questions?
That's it.
I would have I think it would be beneficial for the public to understand how does GWP, if it does at all independently, aside from the city, and/or then how does the city track legislative initiatives? And then is there a particular policy that GWP takes positions on and tries to, on behalf of the city and its citizens? So if you could maybe talk to that a little bit so we have a better understanding, like when we're tracking these things, I know you come up and give us these updates. I think people don't quite understand how we go about doing it. And secondly, is there a stance that we are taking, and how do their concerns and interests get represented up at the state?
Sure. Thank you for the question, President Peterson. That's a very good question. So we partner with our partners through different utilities within California. We're a member of the California Municipal Utilities Coalition, which is the CMUA, and also SCAPA, Southern California Power Authority. So those are the associations that we're part of. They represent a number of different utilities within California. So they're the ones who actually look at number of bills that are coming out from the legislature. Our office personally looks at, we track bills in terms of anything that comes out with water and energy related, and we have a number of meetings throughout the year on the issues that facing utilities or public utilities. What we do is, based on those discussions that we have on a regular basis, we also, if there's a special bill that comes up that has a heavy impact on our utility, then what we do, we look at our council priorities that council approved, adopted to ensure there are about 5 or so council priorities that we look at. If it pertains to any one of those 5, then what we do with the approval of general manager, and then we'll come to commission at times, and we can get a letter from the mayor kind of opposing or supporting a specific bill that comes to us that we think that if it was passed, then they'll have major impacts to our ratepayers, to our utility, and to the amount of work that we need to do to ensure that we comply with the certain legislation. For example, the SB 1020 that I spoke about, the interim targets, we looked at a number of utilities through our Tri-Cities, which is our Pasadena, Burbank, and Glendale. We look at that bill to ensure that it doesn't impact us too heavily, but if it does, then we try to voice our concern through our legislative offices. We meet with a number of our legislatures, for example, Laura Friedman, our assembly member, our Senator Portino, and raise our concerns on what we think that impacts us and how we can somehow, if possible, to change it to lesser impact our utilities to our ratepayers. Just anything that affects us, that impacts us more, then we have a conversation with our general manager, with our commission, and then if we need to, then we can get a letter from our mayor kind of highlighting the issue, and hopefully our assembly member and senators can also help us with kind of a way of changing legislation to our favor.
So as an example, on SB 846, the Diablo Canyon, was that something that we weighed in on?
We did not take a position on that. We didn't take a position on that, but CME and SCAPA did take a position on that because a lot of utilities did that because it was kind of extending the life and to ensure to meet the load of California. As you remember, during the summer times, there was a load increase of about 52,000 for the entire California. We had to ensure that that load was met. And that's when the governor actually thought about this new legislation that was brought up right after this heat wave, and it was introduced, and thankfully that passed and moved forward. But we didn't take any formal position on that bill.
Okay.
as a utility.
Diablo Canyon represents something like 20% of the total state?
2,200 megawatts
2,200, right? So
out of a 52 of 53 all-time peak in the CAISO. So it's substantial. It's about 10%.
it's amazing. Okay, well, that was very helpful to better understand sort of how our constituents are, their concerns and thoughts. And it sounds like what you focus mostly on is sort of an economics approach, making sure that you try to maintain the lowest rates as possible for our community. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. I guess we're on to oral communications. Are we okay with the telephone?
We still have report 4B.
Oh, I'm sorry, 4B. Yes, the RFP update. Yeah.
And for the DER RFP update, we'll have Craig Keenan, Assistant General Manager at GWP, give us a brief update because we're presenting tomorrow.
Okay.
Find my glasses. Anyways, I can read this. Mr. President, Commissioners, Craig Keenan, Assistant General Manager, Business Services. I'm going to give you a quick update on the DER RFP that we issued back. Just a little history. In March of this year, City Council passed a resolution that modified the Grayson Alternative 7, and in part of that requested that, or required the GWP issue an RFP to find more clean energy resources. We were looking for upwards of 50 megawatts. It's going to be in 5 megawatt increments. The RFP went out on May 27th. The responses were due September 30th, 2022. The areas we were looking at were commercial and industrial solar with dispatchable energy storage, residential storage paired with dispatchable energy storage, commercial and industrial PV, renewable distributed generation, demand response, and energy efficiency. We received 24 letters from proposers saying that they planned on submitting a proposal. We had a virtual conference in July. There was 39 attendees from 20 companies showed up to that. Unfortunately, on the due date was September 30th, we only received 4 proposals. We took a quick look at those 4 as far as for legal requirements and such, and only 2 of them met the minimum proposal requirements. Of those 2 proposals, we had one from Willdan Energy Services for a distributed or a battery storage option with large business customers, and the other one was an extension of our current Franklin Energy program for 3 years with a modest increase in output. So incrementally, it was probably 1 megawatt additional above what they're already committed to. As Mark said, tomorrow night we go to City Council to present the findings to date. We haven't analyzed the 2 proposals in depth, the 2 that we received that met all the requirements. We're just giving an update. So we'll go to council, we'll explain to them, the situation of the 2 proposals. We'll work to further evaluate the 2 we received for cost effectiveness. And then at some point, should the evaluation team recommend one or both of these to the city manager, then we would come back to city council on those. So that's where we're at.
Mr. President, members of the commission, we do want to differentiate this RFP with other potential RFPs in that we need to have an assurance that whatever the company is suggesting or proposing, that they actually follow through. So we have bid bonds, we have performance bonds, and these concepts are a little foreign to some DER companies. When we get the solution to Grayson and Shoal and know what our local portfolio is, then we can open up another RFP that might be a little bit more lenient on our guidelines. And if they perform, great. If they don't perform, it doesn't hurt us, other than the fact that we've wasted some time in the performance or the attempt of the performance. But with this RFP, we were specifically trying to reduce the number of thermal generating units at Grayson, so we needed to have the assurance. So that's the big difference between these two RFPs that we've had over the last couple of years and any ones going forward. So it doesn't preclude the other 20 people or companies from engaging with us later on down the line.
Thank you for that update. Any questions? Chris?
Just to follow up on your comment, Mark, excuse me. How can we communicate that to the 20 or so firms that took the time to read the RFP, submit a letter of interest, attend the bid conference, but ultimately did not choose to follow through? That, to me, as somebody who, in my personal professional life, responds to RFPs, to me, that's a signal that they were interested in the concept as a whole, but once they got into the details, there was something they didn't like, and as you said, probably the requirements.
Correct.
But these are probably firms that we would like to engage with the next time around. So how do we make sure we maintain a relationship there?
That's a very good question. We had, under direction of Mr. Keenan, we had the project manager call the companies to express our pleasure in their interest in us, and told them and informed them that it was a little different because we're trying to reduce the thermal generation at Grayson, and that they all are very happy to engage with us in the future. So we did reach out to them. We will then again reach out to them prior to any other RFP, and to make sure that they're in the loop on any further action as far as DER.
That's great. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the requirements of the bid bond or other kind of legal requirements versus the more technical nature of the RFP, the minimum size of 5 megawatts. Was that a hurdle for some of the prospective bidders or maybe bidders to say, oh, we can definitely deliver 1 megawatt or 2 megawatts, but 5 is more than we can commit to? How do you feel that played into it?
There were companies that express reluctance in the 5 megawatt or concern about 5 megawatts. But we were trying to get up to 50 megawatts. So I couldn't imagine having 50 different companies at 1 megawatts and trying to manage them as a utility scale generating unit. So we explained to them that maybe this RFP wasn't for them. But we are interested in doing all the kind of DER opportunities we can possibly do, whether it's virtual power plant. We were very engaged in that years ago, or 4 years, a few months ago, and any type of demand destruction, that would be perfect for us. So we're looking forward to getting a couple of answers done, getting our portfolio intact, and then engaging in this full-time, or more than what we're doing now.
So just to be real clear, in case any of these bidders are watching or listening or tune in, we definitely want to work with them. We expect there'll be another opportunity, and we might have more flexible requirements or more flexible ways to engage.
Yes, perfect.
Great.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Just a quick question on my part. We've hired a energy consultant to work with GWP. I know that was one of the suggestions that we heard from public comment several meetings ago. The concern was that there was no champion inside of GWP, that many community members had confidence that had the expertise as well as the focus. So have we hired someone?
We're currently working with Ted Flanagan out of EcoMotion,
Okay.
and he's working with us on this DER RFP. He also put together a report that'll be presented tomorrow night looking in general at the current state of energy efficiency and DER and
Sure.
GWP, and looked at other utilities surrounding us statewide, nationwide. He even looked over in Europe to find new ideas that we may be able to bring back here.
Yeah. My question is really to piggyback off of Commissioner Fay's questions and comments, that even as we have expertise that's looking at the technical factors, again, I'm concerned a little bit about the commercial factors, that if we go out for future RFPs, we're kind of in our personal, professional lives. He responds to RFPs, I generate a lot of RFPs. And so in terms of public contracting, I understand that, oftentimes nonsensical RFPs get generated through the standard bureaucratic process of various hurdles internally, going from risk management here to legal there to some other, oversight. And you end up with this Frankenstein thing that's stitched together that from a commercial vendor makes no sense. I think in this RFP, wasn't there a bond to submit the intent to submit letter?
Proposal bond. There was a proposal bond, and there would have been, what's the other, performance bond. So there was two bond
Yeah, and
requirements.
typically, for instance, you don't usually put a proposal bond. You definitely put, so that's just an example that's
Sure.
relatively unusual, and
This was a relatively unusual RFP because we
Yeah.
were looking for someone to respond that could guarantee us power just
yeah.
like a Wardzilla
and
would
in
guarantee.
theory, that sounds wonderful, but again, incentivizing people to respond with a workable plan by making them pay to respond to you probably may not be a good way to get people to respond. I'm just,
President Peterson, if I may, commission members. So as Mr. Young and Mr. Keenan explained, this was because we don't know the status of the biogas project and the Grayson repowering project. The city needs to secure its interests. So we required what we require from all proposers. However, going forward, of course, legal and risk management would be working with GWP, and we would take the RFPs on an RFP by RFP basis, and we wouldn't just apply the standard mandatory requirements.
could you help me understand how a proposal bond protects our interests?
So with a proposal bond, generally, when we are committing our time and investing the time, and the city is relying on the proposal that's coming to it, it protects the city's interest in that we're not planning, conducting more future planning, wasting our time, wasting our resources, planning based on what the proposal is telling us that they're going to deliver to the city without some assurance that they're going to come through. That's the intent of a proposal bond. Again, in this case, because we have certain minimums that we wanted to satisfy, minimum requirements, we applied the city's proposal bond requirement. And our requirements are in par with all the other utilities, all the other neighboring cities. In fact, our RFP forms are consistent with other utilities. However, in the future, the city will have the flexibility to be able to say, for example, hypothetically, we'll look for the proposal bond should we decide to accept your proposal. Then we want you to post a bond. In this case, we require them to post it along with the proposal.
So I'm just a little bit confused between a performance bond where if you accept someone's proposal, we've awarded it to you, and then they don't perform under that, then they've got to make you whole. But just for us to review, I can understand a proposal bond if we have a situation, something like maybe in the city planning office where you might get tons of submissions for permits. Maybe we go ahead and we put the equivalent of a proposal bond, i.e. you have to pay to submit permits, so we don't just get inundated with superfluous permits and our staff is overworked, and we want to reduce the number of proposals. but in a situation where we're trying to intentionally have as many proposals, and we're already spending time and effort of our staff, and we're hiring outside consultants, and we're doing all this, but then somehow we protect ourselves by a proposal bond. It seems a little, and I apologize, I need to, I hadn't introduced you, and we should have done that since we've had a change of, I think, legal counsel for GWP. So I'll be able to maybe do that at the closing comments. But anyway, we don't need to, I understand that there was thinking and a decision made, and then going forward, the thinking and the decision seems to be that you're going to be more flexible, looking at the circumstances. The question I would then have is, who gets to weigh in on what the proposals are? So I would hope that you would bring, that the outside consultant would be able to give advice about what might be sort of market terms and conditions in an RFP, besides just the technical ones. But then, does the commission at all get a chance to, because again, we have people on the commission where we've been asked to serve by, city council members because we either do things like respond to RFPs in a public sector, or we're generating public construction, public project, and contract RFPs. So, we may be able to offer some insights and thoughts, if nothing else, to at least communicate what the intent of the various standards would have been.
We'll take you up on that.
Okay. Great. Well, that's all my comments and questions. Thank you very much. Any others? Okay. With that, we'll now move on to item number 5, oral communications.
Discussions is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to the appropriate staff for investigation and report. We do not have any callers.
Okay. So I believe we have one public comment from Stephanie Schuss. Welcome, Ms. Schuss.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner President, and all the commission members and people from GWP and staff. I'm going to speak to the idea of hopefully pushing you guys to, or maybe it's GWP, I'm not sure who it is, to be more proactive in educating and following up with explaining better what the water conservation programs are in effect. It doesn't seem like there's been a sufficient effort to really clarify that after the ban went off, where nobody could do outside watering, that then people were to revert back to the Tuesday, Saturday schedules. I walk around the neighborhood a lot. I mean, I try to put on a couple of miles each day. And the number of people that I see watering almost every day is ridiculous. I mean, and when I've spoken to some people who happen to be out there on their lawn, I say, you're not supposed to be watering. I probably, it's like, I don't mean to be a scold, but my professional career was in communications and marketing. And I just wish that whoever is responsible would be more proactive, because half the people say, oh, well, the ban's off. We can just water. And they don't understand. And the other thing I wish that maybe there has been some internal brainstorming, I'm not sure. But, to come up with more creative ways to suggest to the public how they might, save water. For instance, this is the time when people are are introducing their winter ryegrass. Well, you don't really need to put grass on top of grass. And the problem with the winter grass is that in order for it to be effective, you need to water it every single day for a certain number of days. I mean, that's a real waste of water. So that's a couple of the things, and let me see if I had, I mean, I was happy to hear from the couple of the previous speakers that you are going to put a greater emphasis on education. But, you don't have, I guess the programs that are now in place, there's really no follow-up in terms of trying to, get compliance. Because there's no, I guess, I'm not quite sure what happens. I mean, if somebody is, I know there's a hotline, and I guess maybe some people report neighbors that are watering when they shouldn't be. But, so what? I mean, what happens? I don't really know. So, maybe there is something that happens, but anyway, I wish there would be a way that you can make it more, not necessarily a rule, but to encourage greater compliance, I guess is what I was hoping for, to see. So there you go.
Could I ask you a question since you came all the way down here?
Absolutely.
So what was an effective message that helped you understand that when the ban was off, we were reverting back to the previous schedule? What got your attention?
Well, first of all, what really got my attention was the ban, and not, looking forward to when that was finished. But the Tuesday, Saturday schedule was in effect prior to the ban, from what I remember. And I'm a gardener, so, and I run a gardening group in our neighborhood. So I was constantly telling people in our neighborhood, well, it's great that the ban's away, but, you really need to remember that it's a Tuesday, Saturday schedule. So I'm very tuned into ways of saving water, or, I mean, I drive my husband crazy about that. But I don't know if anything was particularly effective. I mean, in the sense that when something was announced, the program was, I mean, the limited number of days to be able to water and the limited number of time for the stations to be allowed. So, I mean, I was an interested party right from the beginning, but most people, I shouldn't say most people, but I think a lot of people are not, especially if you don't really, are not really concerned about your own gardens.
Well, thank you for being so conscientious about it and for telling your neighbors. I think that's probably one of the most effective ways that people get information is if they hear it from a friendly neighbor. That's a lot more effective than, Big Brother down at GWP telling you what to do with your grass.
I'm always giving away succulents. I mean, because we redid our parkway strip probably 5-6 years ago to be, much
Now you
less.
have more pups than you know what to do with, huh?
Yeah, right. Oh, yes, if you'd like some, I'd be more
Did your
than
garden
happy to
survive
give it.
that ban? It came at a very inopportune time.
Yeah, right. It was, well, I mean, it was a really crazy timing because it was so hot during that period. And people kept saying, that I was talking to, wait a minute, they knew there was going to be a ban, and maybe you didn't know there was going to be a ban, but anyway, it couldn't have come at a worse time. It seemed like in the spring or some other time of year would have been a much better time to have a ban, but, it seems to have worked. I mean, I don't know what the statistics were.
I would like to have Mike DeGhetto answer some of your questions, but officially, I'm not supposed to interact with you, but we will have Mike come up and talk about some of your concerns, because I think the fact that you were here and you're expressing interest in it, it's a good time to hear from Mike. So if Mike can come up and answer.
Like what their communication plans are.
Okay, I think Mike can give you some information, and I've written down that we need to be more proactive and creative ways to find, proactive in communicating and more creative ways in conserving.
Yeah,
So
well, it's
if-
always good to be more creative, whatever you're doing.
Yes.
I used to give workshops on that.
Is it okay for Mike to come up and,
Yes, because you may refer matters to the appropriate staff for investigation or report. doesn't say when we have to do the report. We can do the report right now.
Great.
President Peterson, commission members, as long as it's a brief report responding to the questions, otherwise, if the commission would like a comprehensive report, we'd have to agendize it for
We're
a
not looking
future.
just for the questions.
And I actually think we did this earlier, but I mean, it's okay to talk about it again.
Yes, we just can't do discussion or make any decisions.
President Peterson, members of the commission, so we do social media outreach every week, and I want to say it's on Wednesday about water conservation, like on all the various platforms. We did email alerts, and when the request for no outdoor watering ended, the press release itself did say, and it was a reminder, okay, now we're going back to 2 days a week, just like we were before. But I mean, I do appreciate the comment, and maybe it would be another time, just another thing to send out another set of notices, both through email and social media, and in our bill printing about, yeah, we're still in mandatory conservation, and that hasn't been lifted. And it is 2 days a week, 10 minutes per station, Tuesdays and Saturdays. And even as it was part of the outreach, because this request came from Metropolitan on their whole system, we actually worked with Metropolitan to change some of their wording, because they initially said, oh, go soak your yards on Monday before we do our shutdown. And I said, absolutely not. You can't have that in the press release because Monday's not a day that's allowed in Glendale in our mandatory conservation. So again, it's social media, it's emails. I think I was on the news maybe 5 times. Now, I wasn't on the news after because it wasn't a story anymore, right? Because the news outlets, liked it when, it was a crisis. But so we really do a lot of work. And as far as follow-up and things like that, customers do submit to our hotline, our anonymous hotline, which you can do both via the webpage, email, you can call customer service. And our customer service staff follow up directly with those customers and, try to notify them and let them know that we're still in conservation, you're watering on the wrong days. Someone has turned in something related to that. And we get really a lot of good compliance from that direct outreach to customers that are watering on the wrong days. And then just the other tool that we use is we'll use our AMI system, and we'll run a report to kind of find out who's watering on the wrong days, and then again do some direct outreach to those customers that are watering too many days or the wrong days or watering for too long. So, and in addition to that, I mean, there's coming to commission, there's coming to council. I think I've given a report on the same exact topic to council and to commission related to having statistics and things like that when it was agendized. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, and there's no more public comment?
No, there isn't.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is the agenda forecast. Any comments, Alex or Chris? I've got one, which is, and this is not to in any way diminish the importance of and of the legislative updates that we do get, but I noticed that we have 7 total scheduled, and I know sometimes we end up with additional canceled meetings because of either conflicts and lack of quorum and so forth. So at best, this coming year, we'll have 7 meetings, and 4 of them we're dedicating with legislative updates. One is, I'm not sure that the legislative process moves so quickly and rapidly that we have limited time, and so maybe we can find, there's been a number of other topics that the community has expressed interest in learning more about, things like communication plans and how we might improve those things, efforts that we're doing to, interact and communicate and or enforcement? What are those kind of processes, or incentives, I should say, maybe what type of incentive plans? But there seems to be a lot of other topics of interest that the average citizen is probably less interested in the legislative update, and we may be better served if we spend some time on that. So maybe I could put it to you, Mr. Young, to offer, based on some of the past comments and the meetings that we've had this past year, topics that you think might be something that, it's an opportunity for you and your team to be able to inform the community about all the good work and the efforts that you're doing. We seem to be kind of talking about the same two topics: legislative updates, Grayson. So maybe there's a couple of other things that we can put on.
I'll take note of that. We'll have staff take a look at this. We'll streamline the legislative updates and find some more pertinent information to occupy the calendar.
And if I might suggest, maybe there's some way to do it thematically where we have, it's Water Quality Day at the GWP Commission, and we have a few different reports on a theme or a topic or something like that. I think that might be one way to make it interesting, and we get people who are interested in those topics. They know they can come down here and they'll have a whole 2-hour meeting or something that they're interested in.
I think that's a great idea. We tend to do that, but we don't celebrate that it's Water Day at the GWP Commission. We just put it on the calendar.
It's always Water Day here, right?
Okay, great. Any other comments about the agenda? And again, my apologies for having not introduced early on. Maybe you could just introduce yourself real quick.
Thank you so much, President Peterson, Commission members. My name is Doreen Martirosyan. I have been with the city since 2007. I joined the GWP team in 2009. I have been mostly doing water contracts and water matters, as well as wireless antennas where they need to be placed and, compliance with the FCC requirements. I am excited to branch out into electric and power management, and I look very much forward to working with each and every one of you.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, welcome, and thank you
you.
for your assistance today. With that, could I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
A second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none? All in favor? Aye. Okay, adjourned. Thank you all.